Welcome to Washington Today for Monday, November 25th, 2024. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thanks a lot for listening today. The Justice Department's Special Counsel Jack Smith has announced he is dropping both the federal election subversion and classified documents cases against President-elect Trump. In a motion filed in federal court today, he wrote, quote, "The Justice Department's position is that the Constitution requires that this case be dismissed before the defendant is inaugurated. This outcome is not based on the merits or strength of the case against the defendant." Axios is reporting that Israel and Lebanon have agreed to a ceasefire that could end the Israel-Hezbollah conflict. And according to Reuters, Israel's cabinet will meet tomorrow to approve the deal. The UN Security Council also met today to talk about the conflict. And at that meeting, a senior UN official renewed calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, saying the region is, quote, on the brink of collapse. We are just 56 days until Inauguration Day 2025, and the second Trump administration has taken shape as the president-elect rounded out nominees for all 15 cabinet posts. Meanwhile, two powerful Democrats are criticizing his choices for Director of National Intelligence and to lead the Pentagon and Office of Management and Budget. We'll also hear from a senior researcher at George Mason University about what could be ahead for the Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency. We begin with Jack Smith. He made his filing this afternoon in U.S. District Court, and Judge Tanya Chutkan, it reads in part, quote, after careful consideration, the department has determined that OLC's prior opinions concerning the Constitution's prohibition on federal indictment and prosecution of a sitting president apply to this situation, and that as a result, this prosecution must be dismissed before the defendant is inaugurated. That prohibition is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution, which the government stands fully behind. Statement goes on to say, quote, based on the department's interpretation of the Constitution, the government moves for dismissal without prejudice of the superseding indictment under Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 48A. The government has conferred with defense counsel, who does not object to this motion. The Washington Post reporting that the motion asked Judge Chutkan, as you heard, to dismiss the case without prejudice. That would leave open the possibility of resurrecting it once Donald Trump leaves office. The Post also writing today that, quote, legal experts say it's possible that once Trump is in office, he could try to do something that has never been tested before, pardon himself to foreclose the possibility of legal jeopardy in the future. And the New York Times reporting today that just minutes after making the filing here in Washington, Jack Smith made a similar filing in a federal appeals court in Atlanta that will end his efforts to overturn the dismissal of the president-elect's mishandling of classified documents case. The Times writes, quote, tersely written and only 6 pages long, Mr. Smith's filing to Judge Chutkan effectively ended the Justice Department's years-long efforts to hold Mr. Trump accountable for his attempts to cling to power after he was defeated by Joseph R. Biden Jr. in 2020. That included spreading lies that there had been massive voter fraud and delivering an incendiary speech on January 6, 2021, before a mob of his supporters stormed the Capitol in an effort to block Congress from certifying Joe Biden's victory. And reaction coming in from both sides. House Speaker Mike Johnson said on X, quote, huge win for America. President Trump and the fight against the weaponization of the justice system. This was always about politics and not the law. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer wrote on X, quote, after 2 years, Jack Smith's witch hunt against President Trump is coming to an end. This is a long overdue victory for the American people and the rule of law. And here's New York Democrat Dan Goldman. He was on CNN earlier.
I think it is a shame for justice in this country. It establishes that Donald Trump is above the law. The Supreme Court put him above the law in that opinion that Paula just mentioned. But now he appears to escape full accountability for what were crimes charged by a grand jury. And I would just add one other thing that we ought to pay close attention to. We cannot normalize the fact that Donald Trump, as the president-elect, should not be held accountable for crimes that he committed before.
You can read all of Jack Smith's filing at cspan.org. More now on the prospect of a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon. Here's White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby.
We believe we're close The conversations that Amos had were very positive. And we, as I said earlier, we believe the trajectory is going in the right direction here to potentially getting this ceasefire done. But it's not done. And the last thing that I'm going to do publicly is speak about the details of it and what components are in there, so that I don't in any way sabotage the efforts to actually complete it. This remains an important priority for President Biden. That's why we have been working hard to mediate this deal so that people can return to their lives and their homes around the blue line, and the rockets and missiles can stop. So again, I do understand where all the questions are coming from. They're all fair. They're all right. They're all the right questions to ask today. But I'm just not going to be able to get into too much of the details. I'm not going to get into any of the details here unless or until we've got more to say.
Reuters reporting today that President Biden and French President Emmanuel Macron are expected to announce a ceasefire deal within the next 36 hours. They also report that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office declined to comment on reports that both Israel and Lebanon had agreed to the deal's text, but that a senior Israeli official said that a cabinet meeting has been scheduled for tomorrow to do just that. Here's more from John Kirby on the announcement's timing.
We are at a certain point in the discussions where, again, we believe that that things are moving in a very positive way. It's not. I mean, your question presupposes that we sort of put an anchor on the calendar and said, well, we've got to have it by before Thanksgiving, and that's not the thinking here. With all these negotiations, including the ones that we've been trying to get, with Hamas, it's try again. Keep putting things on the table. Keep exploring things. Keep moving things back and forth as both sides are presenting their requirements to you. And we are mediating this, and we are where we are today because of a lot of back and forth, a lot of discussions, a lot of work, principally by Amos, of course. And we believe we've reached this point where, where we're close. But again, I want to be careful and cautious here in how I characterize it, because until you get everything done, you don't have a deal. So that's kind of where we are. You talked about it being rejected earlier, but there's been back and forth with both sides now for many weeks to get us to this point.
The United Nations Security Council met today about the prospect of a ceasefire. Mohammed Hadi, a UN envoy for the Middle East peace process, called for a deal that was based on UN Security Council Resolution 1701. That's the deal that ended the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah. But also on his agenda was the ongoing situation in Gaza.
Since the conflict began, the United Nations has consistently urged the international community and the parties to chart a course towards peace. We continue to call for an immediate ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and the de-escalation of tension around the region. We continue to demand immediate steps to improve the delivery of humanitarian assistance, which is failing to meet even the most basic needs of Gaza's population. We continue to call for political and security frameworks that would move us closer to resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, ending the occupation, and achieving a two-state solution. Madam President, as the winter approaches, the horror in Gaza continues to grind on with no end in sight. In the more than 13 months of conflict since the vicious attack by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups inside Gaza on 7th of October 2023, some 44,000 Palestinians and some 1,700 Israelis and foreign nationals have been killed. Over 100,000 Palestinians, many women and children, and tens of thousands of Israelis, including women and children, have been injured. 110 Israelis are still held in Gaza, being held in horrific conditions and denied humanitarian visits. Recent weeks have seen devastating intensification of IDF operations in North Gaza, with mass casualty incidents occurring with alarming frequency. On 10th November, 36 Palestinians, including women and children, were reportedly killed, while others were injured, when a multi-story building was hit in Jabalia al-Balad. On 16 November in Beit Lahia, 2 separate Israeli airstrikes reportedly killed at least 65 Palestinians, including women and children, when buildings hosting IDPs were hit. These are but a small fraction of the deadly incidents that have occurred in recent weeks.
Here's Robert Wood, the alternate U.S. representative to the UN, at today's meeting.
Colleagues, we've discussed Gaza at length, and so let me simply reiterate. The United States is doing everything possible to end the war in a way that secures the release of the hostages, surges humanitarian aid to Palestinian civilians, and ensures Israel's security. The Security Council has an obligation not to let Hamas off the hook. Not after the misery, death, and destruction they sparked 13 months ago. Hamas has cynically demonstrated that it prefers the war continue, including by rejecting multiple ceasefire offers and other formulas that would bring much-needed relief to Palestinian civilians desperate for an end to the fighting. We must not cave into Hamas's demands or allow it to dictate the course of events. Rather, we must increase pressure on Hamas to implement Resolution 2735 without condition and without delay. Toward that end, the United States last week imposed additional sanctions on Hamas political leaders and fundraisers. At the same time, Israel must take more steps to facilitate the humanitarian access and the sustained delivery of aid at scale. To restore the flow of commercial goods and to address persistent lawlessness that prevents aid from reaching Palestinians in Gaza. It's abhorrent that criminal gangs have been allowed to loot humanitarian assistance for their own ends. They are taking food and medicine out of the hands of Palestinian civilians, including children. Only after we reach a ceasefire agreement with hostage release consistent with Resolution 2735 will it be possible to chart a new path forward in Gaza that enables Palestinians to rebuild their lives free from Hamas's tyranny. As we have stressed, the UN is not the problem. Rather, it's part of the solution, and we join other Council members in recognizing the risk and sacrifices UN staff are making daily to deliver aid. It's vital that Israel and relevant UN entities find productive and proactive solutions, including on regarding UNRWA, so they can get more life-saving assistance delivered to people in need. At the same time, the United States fundamentally rejects the International Criminal Court's decision to issue arrest warrants for senior Israeli officials. We have been clear that the ICC does not have jurisdiction over this matter, and we are deeply concerned by the prosecutor's rush to seek arrest warrants, as well as troubling process errors that led to this decision. Moreover, this decision does not make the pursuit of peace any easier. We have an opportunity for a political settlement that provides a better future for Israelis and Palestinians. But only if we pressure Hamas, and only if we do not waver in our commitment to a two-state solution. The United States will continue to support diplomacy on the ground and to encourage steps to alleviate the tremendous suffering of Palestinian civilians in Gaza who did not start this conflict and are relying on all of us to help end it.
You can find more from today's Security Council meeting at cspan.org and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. You're listening to Washington Today.
Make your Giving Tuesday donation go twice as far. This year, you can double the impact of your gift to C-SPAN and support unfiltered access to your government. A generous C-SPAN supporter has pledged to match the first $10,000 in donations, meaning every dollar you give will be matched, making your contribution go twice as far. By supporting C-SPAN, you ensure transparent, unfiltered access to your government. Our no commentary, no spin coverage allows you to make up your own mind. Don't wait for Giving Tuesday. Make your impact today. Donate now at cspan.org/donate, and your contribution will be matched dollar for dollar. Visit cspan.org/donate today to help keep democracy unfiltered. Thank you.
Welcome back to Washington Today. President-elect Donald Trump rounded out his cabinet picks this weekend by naming Brooke Rollins for Secretary of Agriculture. USA Today writing about the president-elect's cabinet choices, saying, quote, "They are defined so far by loyalty to the president-elect, right-wing ideology, and a swirl of sexual assault allegations." USA Today went on to say, quote, "The cabinet picks are likely to face bruising confirmation hearings despite Republican control of the Senate." Here's New Jersey Republican Congressman Jeff Van Drew talking about one of those picks, Treasury Secretary nominee Scott Bessent.
Look, he's a smart guy. He knows where the skeletons are hidden. He knows what the problems are. And he truthfully knows how we've been misled and gone down the wrong track. So what he knows is when you have a vibrant economy, when you cut taxes, when you increase revenue, when you're exporting energy and have all the energy that you need in America, that then you will have a better and stronger country, and everyone will do better, from the billionaires right down to the guy breaking his back, working every single day for a union. This is an exciting time. And you know what's exciting? We haven't had a president in modern history who was willing to go outside the normal envelope of what Washington does. This is different. I was speaking to Bobby Kennedy just about an hour ago, talking about health. You know, we spend more dollars per capita in health than any other country in the world, yet we still don't have by far the best infant mortality or the greatest longevity. We can do better in every single way, and I believe we will. It's going to be a bumpy ride, by the way. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to do it.
You talk about health, and you know that firsthand. You're a dentist, or have been a dentist, and there's some, doctors and others of your profession in Congress, and one of them was appointed head of the CDC, former Florida Representative Dave Weldon was in Congress. Of course, there's Jeanette Neshawat, a favorite of ours here, has been a Fox News contributor. She is nominee for a Surgeon General, and Dr. Marty Makary, who's familiar to our audience, nominee of the FDA Commissioner. Here's what the president-elect said about Dr. Makary. And dealing with the CDC. The agency needs, and the FDA, the agency needs Dr. Marty Makary, a highly respected Johns Hopkins surgical oncologist and health policy expert, to course correct and refocus the agency to, among other things, properly evaluate harmful chemicals poisoning our nation's food supply and drugs and biologics being given to our nation's youth, so we can finally address the childhood chronic disease epidemic. Dr. Makary at the FDA, what changes do you see? And it's interesting because that announcement is addressing issues that you usually don't hear directly from Washington. You instead hear dealing with the industry and big pharma.
Exactly. And there's a lot more to healthcare than big pharma. Quite frankly, as a healthcare provider, I know, and I think good healthcare providers know, that healthcare is more than just how many prescriptions you're getting and what you're taking and how many surgeries you've had. Don't get me wrong. We still need prescriptions. We still obviously need surgery, but that isn't all there is to it. There's a holistic approach. What you eat, how you feel, what you do you exercise? Do you take care of yourself? All that's so important. Our kids, this generation of children, are the unhealthiest generation of children ever. We've got to reverse that. I believe we should bring something back, and I spoke to Bobby Kennedy, just like I said an hour ago, about it, the President's Physical Fitness Council, where we really encourage to be healthy.
New Jersey Republican Congressman Jeff Van Drew on Fox News. Meanwhile, Democrats continue to express their concerns over some of the nominees. Here's Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth talking about Defense Secretary nominee Pete Hegseth, who has said he doesn't believe women should serve in combat roles.
He's wrong. our military could not go to war without the 220,000 plus women who serve in uniform. The women in our military does make us more effective, does make us more lethal. And let me just make one thing clear. The women who are in those very particular roles, whether it's in special forces or the SEALs or the infantry, they meet the same standards as the men. And so he's been out there saying that, women are not as strong. The ones who are in those roles have met the same standards as the men and have passed the very rigorous testing. And so he's just flat out wrong. Our military could not go to war without the women who wear this uniform. And frankly, America's daughters are just as capable of defending liberty and freedom as her sons.
Having served in combat yourself, what do you think of the idea that women make fighting more complicated? That was specifically what he focused on.
Well, it just shows his lack of understanding of where our military is. He was a pretty low-ranking guy in the military, and he never had a command position. He was a platoon leader, I think, once or twice, but he never even commanded a company. And so this is a man who is inordinately unqualified for the position. Remember that the Pentagon is 3 million servicemen and women and civilians. It is a over $900 billion budget. He's never, run anything anywhere near to that size. And frankly, women actually make our military more effective. And I've personally found that I brought many insights to my job when I was a company commander, when I was a logistics officer, that came from my own personal background that made things better. I took better care of my men, for example, in my unit. I was often the only woman in an all-male unit, and my gender didn't wasn't a problem. I just adapted, and we continued to perform the mission.
She also talked about Director of National Intelligence nominee Tulsa Gabbard.
Well, I think she's compromised. I think by going to Syria and basically backing a brutal dictator there, Russian-controlled media called her a Russian asset. So I do think that we have a real deep concern whether or not she's a compromised person. And frankly, the U.S. Intelligence Committee, the U.S. intelligence community has identified her as having troubling relationships with America's foes. And so my worry is that she couldn't pass a background check.
Senator Tammy Duckworth, first on CBS's Face the Nation, then CNN's State of the Union. Senator Duckworth sits on both the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee. Both committees will be part of the confirmation process. And two House Oversight Democrats are condemning the choice to lead the White House Office of Management and Budget. Ranking member Jamie Raskin and committee member Melanie Stansbury said in a statement today, quote, after vehemently denying his links to Project 2025 through the campaign, the president-elect just tapped its lead architect, Russell Vought, to run his coming all-of-government purge as director of the Office of Management and Budget. And a story in the Washington Post yesterday reported that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are, quote, interviewing job candidates and seeking advice from experts in Washington and Silicon Valley as they lead the so-called Department of Government Efficiency and plan for massive federal cuts. Well, two experts talked about the complexity of that job. Brookings Institution senior fellow Elaine Kamark, who led a similar effort in the Clinton administration, and Veronique DeRougy, a senior researcher at George Mason University's Mercatus Center.
The federal government each year spends about $6.1 trillion. Most of that money, more than half, is spent on what's called mandatory spending. That means it's Social Security payments, it's Medicare payments, it's retirement payments for veterans, et cetera. So you can't touch that unless you want to raise a great big political stink, which guess what? I don't think Trump really wants to do. I mean, I don't think he's going to be wild about cutting Social Security payments or anything like that. So that takes more than half out of there. Then you've got interest on the debt, and then you've got $1.7 trillion left for what we call discretionary spending. That is the military, that is the FAA, that is the Justice Department, that is the Education Department, that's HUD, that's all the rest of the government. Now, Musk has said, and Ramaswamy have said they want to cut $2 trillion. Well, that's more than the entire federal discretionary spending. So what you have to ask them is, what are you going to cut? What are you going to do without? And this is where the devil is in the details.
Do you think, Elaine, I've heard some folks say, what you should really target is the regulatory state, that if you really target that, you're going to find some good meat, plenty of government waste, duplication, inefficiency. What do you make of that argument?
Well, it's not in the regulatory personnel. I mean, that's where this goes a little fluey. We should be looking at regulations. There is no doubt. There's no doubt that we should take a look at permitting and all this stuff. But that doesn't cut bureaucrats. That doesn't save money. The number of people who are involved in administering the regulatory state is really small. It's bupkis compared to the money that's in the federal government. That's a different exercise than cutting the government. And I think until you understand that, we did that twice. We did that with federal regulations and we did that with internal agency regulations. It's a very good thing to do. They did a little of this in the Bush administration. They did some of this in the Obama administration. So it's a very good thing to do, but it doesn't save you $2 trillion and it doesn't cut 80% of the workforce.
What do you think? Do you agree with that?
No, I agree. I agree with the fact that I think it's unrealistic to think that they're going to be cutting $2 trillion, or even that it's a sound goal, because politically it would be so difficult and so disruptive. That said, I will disagree on one important fact, which is it is true that most of the money is on Medicare, Social Security, and Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That is absolutely true, but it's not true that we can't do anything about it. In fact, if Congress doesn't do anything about it, legally by law, benefits, for instance, for Social Security when the trust fund dries out will be cut by 21%. So Congress is going to have to do something to make sure it preserves benefits for lower income beneficiaries, right? It's going to, because the 21% cut across the board would be very, very, very painful. It's also not right to say that these programs, because they're on the mandatory side, shouldn't be cut, because they are the driver of our future debt. If what Congress decides to do when the trust fund expires is to pay all the benefits the way they are with borrowing, it means we're going to have, just for Social Security and Medicare, to borrow $115 trillion. Just to give a perspective, this is almost 4 times more than we've borrowed in the entire history of the United States in just 30 years. Who's going to be lending us all that money? So it's correct to say all of the money is in these programs. It is also correct to say that we have the last 2 years, the inflation, the rise of interest payment on the debt have made the problem even harder, because we cannot default on these interest payments, and they represent a bigger and bigger part of the problem. But I don't think it's right to say, well, we just simply can't touch these programs. Now, the question is whether you can do it through the way they want to do it, and whether you get at it just by firing people. And I think I don't think you can address this question this way. But there's a lot we can do. They have an enormous microphone, and they're bringing attention to the fact that we have a big problem. And that's the beginning of a conversation.
Veronique de Rougy, George Mason University Mercatus Center Senior Research Fellow, speaking on today's Washington Journal. You can see more at cspan.org and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Finally, today was a good day to be a turkey, as President Biden tapped into his presidential pardon power in an annual White House tradition.
We've got a lot of folks joining us today, members of my cabinet, members of the White House staff and their families. We got students from 4-H programs and Future Farmers America. Where are you? And of course, a special thanks to everyone at the National Turkey Federation. Leslie Olden, president of the Federation. Leslie, where are you? There you are. And John Zimmerman, chairman of the Federation, and his family from Northfield, Minnesota. John. I was in Northfield last year with my Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, and our great friend, the Minnesota Governor, Tim Walz, talking about our historic investment in transforming rural America. Back in Minnesota, John's been in the turkey grower for 35 years. He's raised over 4 million turkeys. Whoa. And with the help of his 9-year-old son, Grant, they've raised 2 special guests we're honoring today, Peach and Blossom. Let's bring Peach up to join us. Hey, tell me, Peach weighs about 42 pounds? What did you say, Peach? Peach is making a last-minute plea here. The 2 turkeys are named after a Delaware state flower, the peach blossom. And by the way, Delaware has a long history of growing peaches. In fact, the peach pie in our state is one of my favorites. It's a state dessert. And peach blossom flower is also symbolizes resilience, which is quite frankly fitting for today. This White House tradition began when turkey was presented to President Truman. And that president, then President George H.W. Bush, began pardoning turkeys. In the last 4 years, I've had the honor to continue that tradition by pardoning peanut butter and jelly, chocolate and chip, Liberty and Bell, and today, Peach and Blossom will join the free birds of the United States of America. Born this past July at the Zimmerman family farm, raised by the, yeah, I hear you. Peach wants to speak a little bit here. Raised by the family with the help of neighborhood children who helped the turkey get ready for this very moment. According to experts, Peach weighs 41 pounds and loves to eat hot dish and tater tots and cross-country skis. You know, dreams to see, but the real dream he has is to see the Northern Lights, I'm told. He lives by the motto, keep calm and gobble on. Meanwhile, Blossom weighs 40 pounds, loves to eat cheese curds and watch boxing, dreams of to visit each one of Minnesota's 10,000 lakes, lives by the motto, no foul play, just Minnesota nice. They just finished a 2-day road trip from Minnesota to Washington. By the way, you have chairs? Sit down. I forgot you had chairs. I'm sorry. Started thinking about the arduous trip they made. You guys are still standing. That trip's 1,100 miles. It takes 16.5 hours. Through it all, they stayed calm and they gobbled on and still gobbling. They stayed nice listening to their favorite music, which apparently includes the song Living on a Prayer. Well, fellas, your prayer is going to be answered today. Based on your temperament and commitment to being productive members of society, I hereby pardon Peach and Blossom. They'll now head back to Farm America, Minnesota Center for Agriculture and Interpretation to serve as educational ambassadors of America's top turkey-growing state and inspire the next generation of agricultural students. Congratulations. Let me close on a more serious note. This event marks the official start of the holiday season here in Washington. It's also my last time to speak here as your president during this season and give thanks and gratitude. So let me say to you, it's been the honor of my life. I'm forever grateful. Later today, my wife Jill and I will travel to Staten Island, New York for a Friendsgiving with members of the Coast Guard and their families to demonstrate our gratitude for their service and sacrifice like my son. We also keep in our hearts those who have lost so much, who will have an empty seat at the Thanksgiving dinner table tonight, or excuse me, Thursday night. May we use this moment, take time from our busy lives, and focus on what matters most, our families. My dad used to have an expression, family's the beginning, the middle, and the end. Our friends and our neighbors. And the fact that we're blessed to live in America, the greatest country on earth, and that's not hyperbole, we are. No matter what, in America we never give up. We keep going. We keep the faith. We just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. So happy Thanksgiving, America. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
Peach and Blossom, 2 lucky turkeys this Thanksgiving. As you heard, they were hatched in Minnesota and rode the gravy train here to Washington over the weekend. They will live out their days at Farm America in southern Minnesota. You can see all of the fun at today's White House event, along with past turkey pardonings, at cspan.org, and it's also on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. That's also where you can find this program as a podcast. It's also on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And for more on the stories that are shaping Washington every day, get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterikoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.